That joke isn't funny anymore. Available on Amazon and everywhere. Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast. I'm your host, Lou Perez, and today I am joined by Yiatin Chu. Yiatin is an immigrant. She's a public school mom. She worked in the private sector in healthcare and a number of other things, and she got into local politics and is now running for New York State Senate. Yiatin, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure, Lou. Good to see you again.
Yeah, nice to see you. Yeah, it's you look very professional as always, and I just got out of the shower, and
I did too.
Oh, did you? Look at that. Look at that. I think you shape up a lot better than me.
Well, I'm a middle-aged woman that needs a little more help.
One day I could be a middle-aged woman if I work hard enough and make it out. As far as us, seeing each other again, I think it's safe to say we met, a few months back. You were, I was, kind of conducting an interview sort of thing about your run for in local politics, and in particular how education got you into it. So you're a New Yorker, and yeah, so you are running for office in New York State Senate. And I guess right off the bat, what has that been like, and what is the process for a relatively unknown person, a civilian deciding to come into politics, even on the local level? I mean, it sounds like a huge undertaking.
It is a huge undertaking. It is a local office. I am just a regular New Yorker that has lived predominantly private life. My family came here in 1976. I was 8 years old. I went through New York City's public school education, went to work for private companies, had children of my own, lived, where I am today in Whitestone. It's where my family still is. But during a big chunk of my time, I was living on the Upper West Side. I lived on the Lower East Side, and I even had a little stint in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. So I feel like I've had a good perspective of New York City through different boroughs, and also through talking to people around the city, and also people in this district in the last few months. As you shared, I got into local issues through the lens of education. My daughter was at a school, and I met some moms that were unhappy with what de Blasio was trying to do to some changes at specialized high schools. These are New York City's, I want to say, magnet schools for people around the country. And one of those schools is my alma mater. So that's kind of a window in terms of why I'm here today. But to answer your question, what has campaigning been like for someone who is relatively unknown in the city? Except I have to say, Lou, New York Magazine, which is a pretty respectable, I want to say, liberal magazine that I used to subscribe to for many, many years, featured me in October, just this past October, as the most powerful people you've never heard of.
That's amazing.
Yes.
It almost sounds like it almost sounds like you're a gangster. It's sort of like you don't want to mess with this person. Yeah.
I hope not. But just to bring you back, I thought about running for office really at the very end of last year. Unlike many people I hear about who think about running for office really for years. And as a matter of fact, some people for local races plan what district they want to live in so that they can use more favorable underlying, demographics to their advantage. I didn't do that. It was, I want to say, kind of impulsive. While I've been doing advocacy work for the last 5 years, running for office was never something I cared for. I kind of found politicians and a lot of the electeds that I was interacting with in the last 5 years, most of them were kind of off-putting to me. So it wasn't something that I was wanting to join. But there were a couple of events that made me think about what I can do as someone who would have a seat at the table, who would be able to sponsor legislation, who would have a say in bills. I would have a bully pulpit that's larger than what I have today, and really make some changes to our lives here as New Yorkers. So it's kind of why how I got in at the very beginning of the year. How has it been since running for office in February? It's been really hectic. There's so much you don't know as a first-time candidate, and there's so much people, they want to share with you. I do know people that have run for office, and they all try to be helpful, but it's very different when you're actually the candidate. Just how frantic it is, and as a mom, as a wife, it's about balancing my life with the rest of my life, and it's not easy, and I think it's a big reason why people don't do it. Good people that want to, I want to say, do good things, will think about running for office as something very scary and very hard to do.
Well, the very fact that you had that profile in New York Magazine. I mean, when you first said that, the first thought in my head was like, "Wow, that's amazing." Then the second thought was, "Uh-oh, what do they write about you? How are they framing you? Like, what are what are details from your past that they are bringing up for either favorably or negatively?" And when you do run for office, I think probably one of the things that keeps a lot of good people out is that it's sort of like your whole life then becomes fodder for either for your enemies to use. So were you happy overall with the how they depicted you?
Yeah, no, I think New York Magazine, the profile was good, was absolutely good. The last few years I've been doing a lot of work, including co-founding a political club, for lack of a better term, a nonpartisan political club focused on Asian American issues, and really in New York. And when Lee Zeldin ran for governor in 2022 against Kathy Hochul, who won and who is our current governor, I was quite active in supporting his campaign. Actually, it turned out during the primary, I was actually doing a lot of work for Tom Suozzi, who's a Democrat. I was a Democrat, and I liked Tom Suozzi because out of the Democrats that were running in the primary for governor, I thought he was the most common sense. He had a history of doing good work in Long Island, where he was a congressman. So I worked pretty hard on his campaign, especially in the Asian community. But when he lost, I took a look at the landscape and I started helping Lee Zeldin. So it was through the establishment of Asian Wave Alliance, keeping really tabs on what was going on in terms of Asian community engagement in local issues and how we are just not quite there in terms of political involvement, that brought me to not only work on Lee Zeldin's campaign, but got me the profile in New York Magazine.
Yeah.
Well, so nothing bad, all good.
Good. No, I'm happy to hear that. Suozzi, this is the first time that I'm hearing that name. If I was working on his campaign, I would try to persuade him to change the pronunciation to Swayze, because I think like Patrick Swayze, I think that would have just gotten a lot of people involved. Like, that's just me.
Well, the next campaign, yeah, I was going to say, unlike me, he's a very tenured elected official. So, as a matter of fact, having represented parts of Long Island and now parts of Queens, he's actually my congressman. His name Suozzi is kind of well known in this area.
You got it. I am totally guilty of falling into like national politics and kind of turning a blind eye to local politics. Like I know a lot more about what's going on, say, in what the the Senate, are arguing about, in particular, like the kind of soap opera-ish BS that happens like in the Senate, than what's happening in my local community. And actually, it turns out in my local community, like there's a lot going on. Like there's, even for like a small kind of town that we're in, there's a lot of money at stake with certain things and all that. But yet I'm kind of not attached to it. So what was your sort of entryway into, like, what was the topic? Was it education that got you in? It was like, yo, I need to do something.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of other issues. And Lou, you're right. I for most of my life, I never paid attention to politics. My life was too busy. As a working mom and a single mom at one point in my life, there were just too much on my plate to pay attention to anything more than what I had to do day to day. But the first time I started paying attention to even national politics was when Hillary Clinton lost and Trump was our president. In 2016, my entire, I want to say, daily life was watching MSNBC. All I cared about was national politics. I didn't know what was going on in the Upper West Side at that time. I didn't know what was going on in Queens at that time where I grew up. So I feel like what you've said and my experience is typical of most people. Most people don't understand what's going on. And part of it is so much of our lives are influenced by mass media. Social media still plays a role, but it's a minority of people that actually engage in social media. So the mass media, I want to say, influence and control like what the dialogue is every day as it relates to politics. And most of that discussion is at the national level. Salacious stuff, big things, important things too. So I don't want to make it out like that, but it's at the national level. How did I get involved in more local politics? It is through education. Our public schools, I mean, to me, going to public schools in New York as an immigrant, it really changed my life. If it wasn't for great public school education and great teachers along the way, I wouldn't be where I am today. So when I heard that the mayor, New York City wanted to make some very drastic changes to our high school admissions, and not only would it affect the impact on our education, but these particular high schools were majority Asian. And most of the kids that go to these schools are Asian kids from immigrant families or are immigrants themselves at this time. So it's, to me, also a civil rights issue. It wasn't just an education issue. It was a civil rights issue, standing up for Asian Americans who did not have a seat at the table when these decisions were being proposed. And it would have a huge influence on their lives and the prosperity and opportunities of Asian New Yorkers here. So that's how I got started. And then at the same time, there were other issues that concerned many people in New York, like the closing of Rikers and putting jails in local residential areas. There were a lot of rallies around that. It's an ongoing thing about homeless shelters and now migrant shelters that are being placed throughout New York City. I would say those things. There were also a lot of the defund the police sentiment when I was starting to get involved in local politics. I respect what our police officers have to do every day. Are there bad apples? Yes. Like in every profession, there are people that you're like, oh man, whether it's teachers or police officers or politicians, right? There's always some good and some bad. And because of some things happening nationally and locally, there was a very extreme position that sucked up a lot of the local, local attention on defunding the police, which made me feel less safe. So those are some of the things that brought me to local politics.
Yeah, those are all huge issues. I remember the days of De Blasio, trying to put forth that attempt to bring, I guess, equity to the specialized high schools. And for me, so I'm a Queens kid as well, and I went to.
Oh, I forgot that.
Yeah. I born in Woodside, and then I think when I was around 11 or 12, moved to Little Neck. So from
Ooh, fancy area. That's part of my
very.
district.
Oh yeah, no. Well, I gotta let my parents know.
Part of my district, Senate district. Yeah.
I will convince my parents. I'll say you got to get to the polls. You gotta support Chu. So I went to public school all the way from pre-K all through 8th grade, and then I went to Catholic school in high school. And I very stupidly went to Catholic school in high school because I wanted to play. I played ice hockey, and they had a really good ice hockey team. So I was like, oh, let me go there to play hockey. And my parents are always very supportive. So no one was like, no, take the entrance exam for the specialized high schools, and let's see how you do and all that. But whatever, I think everything turned out well. But
everything always turns out fine. I mean, that is the truth. Most things do turn out fine, personally.
Yeah, most things turn out fine. But one of the cool things is for the 6th grade, I was in a magnet program at PS 122 in Queens, and I got to go back there as an alumni to talk to the students there about colleges. So I was like one of, I think it was 3 graduates from NYU. Like they got like all NYU kids to go. And, I'm there. My dad is an immigrant. My dad's from Argentina. And I'm looking out at, all these children of immigrants who look just like the kids that I went to school with from, all over the place, because Queens is so mixed. It's, so diverse. And it was really cool, getting to talk to them and just say like, you guys aren't going to have problems getting into college. Like you're going to be, you're you guys have nothing to worry about. You guys are going to be awesome, because I know how, I know what the academics are like there. But, this idea that somehow everybody is, guaranteed or has a right to go to Stuyvesant is absolutely insane. And to try to frame it like, oh, there's not enough, representation of Latinos or, Black students in this school. Yet there's an overrepresentation of Asian students. The way that I look at it is like, as a Latino, well, if I didn't have the grades, if I didn't have the score to get into Stuyvesant, okay, I'm not good enough for Stuyvesant, or that day I wasn't good enough or whatever. Mm-hmm. Okay, what are my other alternatives? Okay.
Right.
But the idea to look at the kids who do get into Stuyvesant and say, that's my spot. I am owed that. It's just, it never sat well with me. And, having just that firsthand experience of being a kid who got into magnet programs and seeing how hard those kids worked and studied, the idea that, someone like de Blasio was going to take that away from people. I was just really irked by the whole thing.
Yeah. I know the specialized high school in this fight inside and out, and I can talk about it any day, every day. It's definitely a political decision. I mean, a lot of these type of race-based, race-divisive issues, when it's picked up by electeds, it's for a political reason. It's not for educational reason. It's not for the betterment of even groups that they say that they're trying to help. I agree with you in that, the way that he phrased it, and especially his school chancellor, Richard Carranza, which made things way worse because he was, he's a racist, number one, and he used rhetoric that were very, very divisive. No one owns the seat. No one owns the seat. Everyone takes a race-blind test to see how they score. And if you score, I guess high enough for these schools, you get a seat. If you don't, you don't. Look, the racial demographics for these specialized high schools have certainly changed over the decades. When I went to Bronx Science in the 80s, very different. Asians were not the majority. I want to say that we were maybe 30-something%. It's still significant, but certainly not the majority. And a lot of the changes that has happened over the decades is a combination of pretty significant changes to the quality of education we've had in New York from kindergarten to 8th grade, which is determining how prepared you are, right, for some of these, academically rigorous high schools that we're talking about. And also immigration patterns have changed. These specialized high schools, especially the three, big names or the bigger ones like Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, and Brooklyn Tech, they've been around for decades. And, in the 40s and 50s and 60s, they were predominantly schools with Jewish students. The immigration patterns to New York and what families were looking to in terms of public education brought in different nationalities, different cultures, and different backgrounds. And since the 1970s, we've had more Asians coming into New York City and low-income Asians in New York City looking for great public school options. So I want to say there's probably more to that, but those are probably the two explainers of why these schools have become predominantly Asian over the last few decades. But look, when I talk to parents, whether they're Black, Hispanic, Asian, white, on a one-on-one basis, we are always trying to find the most appropriate school for our child. Incidentally, my younger one is in 8th grade. So she's actually applying to high school this year. So after all these years that I've been doing education advocacy and trying to keep the test, and we've kept the test, me personally is being impacted. So I am grateful that with the help of other advocates that we still have the test around for her to take this year. Yeah. But on a personal level with parents, like you said, your child may not be a good fit for Stuyvesant, but there are 670, 80 other programs in New York City that may be a good fit for your child. And I would argue there are several dozens of very, very popular, very, very academically rigorous schools that students can still go to besides these, schools that uses the SHSAT test. So you're right. So that's why I think this having been an issue is one that politicians make of it. It's really not as significant to the day-to-day parent making decisions for their children.
Yeah. And on the subject of crime in the city, or defund the police and everything that that happened around there. So I take it that you started getting into politics and concerns probably around like 2020. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the day because the day that I became public in my positions, for specialized high school and then evolved into other things was March 15, 2019. I spoke at a Senate hearing, a New York Senate hearing. Actually, it was joint New York Senate and Assembly hearing on education. So every few years in New York State, the state legislators would reevaluate whether to continue mayoral control. So unlike other states, since Mayor Bloomberg made the change, New York City has what we call mayoral control. So the mayor actually makes a lot of decisions, make all the decisions as it relates to our New York City public schools. And he got that from Albany. Albany gives him permission and renews this mayoral control every few years. So at the hearing of mayoral control in 2019, I spoke up about, specialized high schools and what this administration was trying to do to get rid of the test, which is actually in state law. It's the state law is called Heck-Calandra. The Heck-Calandra law passed in 1971 stipulated that these specialized high schools would use this SHSAT, the sole test, to admit students as the only criteria for admissions. So this is why I'm interested in local politics at the state level and, somewhat at the city level, because it governs a lot of what I got into politics for.
Yeah. But one of the criticisms that I hear is when when it comes to the test is like, oh, the hack is basically you teach for the test, or you prepare for the test.
You test prep. You test prep.
You test
and
prep.
People have to pay a lot of money and to give to this industry of tutoring centers that take advantage of parents who want to prep their kids to go to, Lou, I
know it. So I hear that all the time. And it reminds me of when I was in the magnet program, and I, had friends of mine, classmates, when I would look over, and during like lunch, they would have like these thick, like pre-SAT, like pre-SAT books, or either the pre-SAT or SAT books in particular. And you looked, and they were all from the public library, So you had these old tests that you could go to the public library, take out, and prep off of that.
That's what I did.
So it's all there, and it's a thing where when I hear people say like, oh, it's all about test prep, like, then I want to ask them, well, how many hours is your child prepping? Here you are complaining about, oh, it's just the test. The test only measures the test. It's not going to say how good they are in school. It's like, okay, well then you just pointed out how to beat the system, kick ass on the test. So, and I often find like the people who are the people who are complaining the hardest are the ones whose kids are not putting in the prep work that one would need in order to do that, and they're looking for every other, excuse they can make for it,
No, and I hear that, and here's what I would say. I mean, you're an ice hockey player. You put in time to practice, right? To get better. Anything you want to get better at, you have to put in the time, right? And often you do need to have the right coaches, the teachers and instructors, whether you want to be a great violin player, whether you want to be a great ice hockey player, whether you want to, get better times on your track meets, right? All of these things require the individual, the student, the athlete, the performer to put in time. And I always say, why don't, athletes and performers get criticized when they're hiring coaches, when they're putting in the hours to do what they want to do to improve on, where they're at? And why is it that just math and ELA, or the things that are tested on the test, are being criticized? These kids are, they're prepping, they're learning. And unfortunately, they don't get to learn everything that they should be learning in our New York City public schools. Just personally, when I took the test in, I guess, 1980, because I went to Bronx Science in 1981 to 85, there wasn't actually a test prep industry as what we're calling it now. There were Barron's guides of old tests that you can borrow from the library, or you can pay. They were probably like $12.95 back then from Dalton's or whatever, bookstore that was the bookstore. And I studied from, a test guide. There were no prep. And I think had a pretty good public school education in junior high school. And I did well enough to get into Bronx Science. There was no prep. So nowadays, yes, you have private test prep. You have city public school, our DOE provides free test prep for students who are eligible. And there are a lot of private test preps that give scholarships to kids who really can't afford their rates. In the Chinese community that I know of, where they have test prep, the cost isn't really that much. And I think parents see it as a good use of their money. And to the people who say, hey, you're making parents spend money to help them prep for the tests, I'm like, look, they earn their money, hard-earned money. They can use it for whatever they want to use it for. If they think the best thing is to pay $1,000 for a test prep program for their kid, instead of paying $70,000 for a private school education, or $20,000 for a Catholic school education, like, what's it for you? I mean, so what?
Yeah. I used to, I taught for, I don't know, it was like 1 year. I taught for Princeton Review. And
Yes.
I taught through the there was a program there, it was Peter J. Sharp program, which was basically giving scholarships to, you know,
Yeah.
kids who weren't able to afford it. And I had like a really touching moment with one of the, I don't know if I can call her a student because it's like a test prep thing. And the Princeton Review, their whole thing was like, we're not we're not teachers, like we're kind of badass, like, you know, you can curse in class and stuff because you're cool, you know. It was yeah, whatever that was. But she, you know, she said to me, because her score had improved, and she said, oh, I couldn't have done it without you. And it was a really sweet thing to hear. But the reality is like no, you did this, you know, you put the work in, you put, you know, you earned this, you know. But then, you know, like also like, you know, something that I realized too while I was teaching for Princeton Review, and something that Princeton Review kind of let us know is like, you know, you're going to have some students where they will never ever get 1,600 on their SAT. They're never going to get even close to a 1,500 or 1,400. There are, you know, limits just by limiting factors, but you know what you and your IQ can do. You know, so
I can't play ice hockey.
Yeah. So, you know, there's going to be improvements that you can have, but there are limits there. So even the idea that, you know, oh, this kid is possibly getting a perfect score on their SAT because of test prep is bullshit. You know, it's like, no, I could not do that. Like maybe if you gave me the test and I had no time limit whatsoever, I had a week where I can go and take the test, then I think I can get every single one of them correct. Because I'm going to be going through and, you know, taking every single option, you know, choice and plugging it in and be like, okay, that's it. So, you know, it was the reality too of just accepting one's limits, you know, like
yes.
I have a friend of mine who was, my friend Mark, growing up, his dad was a mathematician. He worked for Chase in like some, I don't know if it's the IT department or something like that, just a brilliant guy. And his son was brilliant at math. Like he's, you know, I think he got, you know, the perfect 800 on his test. Yes. And I used to go over there and, you know, he would help like tutor the both of us. And the dad would get pissed off, not at me, but at my Catholic high school. He had a thing against Catholics. So he was Armenian. He had a thing against, he's like, these damn Catholics, they're not teaching you. You know, I didn't know what the word integer meant. And he's like, how don't you know what that means? Like these damn Catholics, they're not teaching you right. It was a fun. I'm very happy that I have, you know, that memory with his dad. But the reality is, you know, Mark was brilliant at math, and he sucked on the you know, the English portion,
the ELA portion.
Yeah, he sucked. You know, he might as well have been illiterate. Like that's how bad he was.
No, and I think that
yeah.
it's spot on, right? We have to recognize that even in the same family, right? And very, very often people will say, well, you know, they have the privilege of having highly educated parents, a stable home life, socioeconomically more affluent, and it's unfair. A lot of, well, I want to say specialized high school, that's certainly not true, but even if they have all of those things, you know, I have two siblings, I have two sisters. How well we do in our school varies. You know, there is the innate kind of, you know, I want to say talent or ability to do things, math, English, you know, performing arts. There's so many different talents, right? And then it's just whether or not you care to put in the time. Some of it is personality. All of those things go into whether someone would, you know, do well on some of these admissions tests. And race is maybe one. I just feel like race is being highlighted as the thing that they can talk about, and it is to be divisive about it. When the truth is, you know, my sister didn't want to go, don't want to take the test. There are lots of Asian kids, lots of Chinese kids who I say, oh my goodness, they're not fit for those schools. And some of them actually do prep and get in and do poorly, to be honest. Yeah. And as a parent, advising other parents, I said, look, you need to be honest with yourself and in your child, and these schools, while they're quote famous, may not be the right place for them to spend the next 4 years. So yeah, they're, you know, I know people that are super talented. I went to school with, I'm good friends with Lisa Su, who is the CEO of AMD. It's a public company, semiconductor. She is, her dad was a mathematician. She got her like MIT master's and PhD in like, I don't know, like 6 years or something crazy like that. You know, she's brilliant. She's brilliant in what she does. I can never do that. And very few people can do that. So yeah, I think to say that these schools need to reflect the general demographics, general racial demographics of New York City is just crazy. Like that's not really what these schools are intended for.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I had Diane Yap on a few months back, and Diane is she's from San Francisco, and one of her big things has been talking about crime in San Francisco, and in particular in the Asian community, or you know, the targets of crime being members of the Asian community, elderly, you know, Asians, in particular, and it's, you see videos of this stuff, and it's, you know, gruesome. You know, an 80-year-old woman is just walking down the street, and a young punk comes and, you know, punches her in the face and stuff. It's really gross. And one of the things that we talked about and laughed about was this idea of the lack of education of these people, of the perps. The idea being, in order to stop these violent maniacs from doing this, you have to educate them. Yeah. And it's like, no, education's great, but it's not going to help this lot whatsoever. You know, a very small minority of people, in particular men, do this violent public crap, and sitting them down and talking and teaching them about our common humanity, or having them read I don't know, To Kill a Mockingbird, I don't think is going to do it. I think ultimately the way that you defeat criminals is you fight crime. And when it comes to New York, and, you know, something that you brought up about, you know, defund the police, I wouldn't say that I am pro cop. I'm not pro police. Mm-hmm. What I am is anti-criminal. So the way that I look at it is any way that criminals are being handled, I'm okay with. And it would be one thing if in New York City they're like, okay, we're going to defund the police, but what that means is the citizens of the state and the city have the ability to fight back against, you know, these criminals. And often what you find is that you know, business owners, people who own property, and you know, just people walking down the street, their hands are tied as far as you know, what they can do to fight back against, you know, what would just be insane. I mean, you know, whether it's, you know, homeless or violent people and all of that. So.
No, you're actually, that's a very good way of putting it. I call a lot of our electeds pro-criminal. They focus a lot of their legislative time in passing pro-criminal policies, and you know, fortunately, unfortunately, I mean, they're a small percent of our population, absolutely, but they seem to do an inordinate amount of harm and fear, you know, exert fear on our entire society, right? Instead of being anti-criminal, which I think everyone is, like you know, we have laws, most of them are good laws, and we want to be safe. We want to protect ourselves. We want to protect our homes. We want to protect our businesses. And a lot of what they've been doing in the last few years, and this is a top priority for me, if I'm elected to state office, is passing laws that make it easier for criminals to not just commit crime without consequence, but to be out and commit multiple crimes, repeat crimes. You know, and whether it's a lot of people or a few people, you're doing a lot of destruction to how we feel as law-abiding citizens, right? Not feeling safe. You know, their answer, and here's something that happened, you know, shoplifting has been, you know, increasing in New York City. because they just don't want to prosecute. And the system has gotten so onerous for our DAs to even bring cases to judges because of discovery laws. So there's a lot of complication. They've just made it harder to basically get people back in jail. So shoplifting's been on the rise. And what do our state legislators do instead of to prevent people from committing crimes? Instead, what they've done, including the woman that I'm challenging, is they passed a bill to give tax credits to store owners to buy more surveillance equipment. And I'm like, really? Really? So now the onus is on the store owner to front the money, $5,000, whatever it is, so that they can install these cameras to record down criminal activity, which cops often, use, don't use, can't get them on. And then they'll get a tax credit for doing that. So I'm like, what?
Right.
Anyway, so I just don't feel like they're serious about being anti-criminal these days. And we need to get serious. New York is not going in the right direction. And no matter who I speak with, and I speak with voters every day these days, whether they're a Democrat or they're independent or they're a Republican, they nod their heads in terms of public safety is not where we need it to be. And it has all to do with a lot of the policies that we've passed in the last few years.
Yeah, and the one I don't know if you've seen this meme that's gone around, but there was a person who had tweeted out something along the lines of like arresting people for shoplifting is BS. Quit doing this. Like, it's not a big deal. And then, however many months later, it's like, oh my God, I got to go to Duane Reade and it's taking forever because everything is locked up. What the hell? And it's like, yeah, you're okay with shoplifting. Now you have to suffer the consequences of it, of daily annoyance. And I think, too, with, there's a lot of truth to be said about, all you need is one person that can just ruin everything. You see it in classrooms. You have one disruptive kid ruins it for everybody. You see it in society at large. Everyone could be having a fine time on the subway. You just need that one maniac, to go through and to, and to be ruining it. And, as far as like, particular like legislation that you're, aiming for, what are, a few of the things, if you wanted to rattle off, like for example, how do you punish shoplifters to make sure that it doesn't, they don't rescind, come back and do it again?
Yeah, no, there has to be consequences. Look, first time offenses, nonviolent offenses, people make mistakes. We're all human. We make mistakes. I get that. But we're talking about people who make it a habit, who make it a career in terms of committing stealing, and it escalates to worse things, right? There's a sense of lawlessness now because we're not serious about actually, giving people punishment for breaking laws. And when you do that, whether it's about running red lights, speeding, I get a ticket, and paying $65 is not something I want to do routinely. I'm going to be more careful. When you don't do that, you are saying it's okay. And whatever reason they started to do it in the first place will continue to do that. So fixing bail reform is number one. Actually, New York was getting safer up until 2018, 2019. Then a blue wave of very progressive legislators got into our state and passed laws like what we call bail reform discovery that now have a list of offenses where they're not going to hold someone for bail. And honestly, from my standpoint, I don't really care about the money. And they're right. Like, just because you're rich doesn't allow you to get off when you do something awful, and you're poor and you can't afford it. To me, is if you're dangerous, okay, and you have shown a pattern of committing the same crime, the judge should be able to remand you and keep you off the streets. So it's not about the quantitative monetary money, which I think gives the people who pass this the talking point, because most people feel, and they're right, like, why should a more wealthy person get off and a poor person don't? That's just wrong. What we need to assess is whether this person is dangerous, and we need to return that assessment to our judges. The judges shouldn't be a cookie cutter, okay, not on the list, you get to go. The judges should be able to take a look at the holistic record and be able to make an assessment best for our society, right? So that's what I want to do. I want to also look at discovery laws, which has made it so onerous for our DAs to bring cases. It's so much so that half the cases aren't even being brought to the judges to be evaluated, because they've made it such a tall order to get all of the evidence, all of that, what they call discovery, in place before they can even bring it in front of the judge. So those things need to be fixed. That's number one. The second is we've got a huge migrant crisis in New York City. So we haven't talked about that. But in my district and throughout New York, this has been a huge issue for the everyday person. And in my district, we have one of the largest migrant shelters, Creedmoor. Creedmoor is in my district. We have over 1,000 single men that are in this tent city, situated right in the middle of my district.
I just want to say something quickly about that, and I'm glad that you pointed out that they're single men, because what really annoys me is people calling a lot of these guys like asylum seekers, and it's like for one, no, a lot of them are coming from countries that they're not being persecuted at all, and also they're all freaking men who are here solo. It's not like it's 1,000 women and children who are cooped up here. It's like, no, it's guys, as they describe them, military fighting men or something, like military age men or something.
I mean, there are, I've been there because I drive through it and I walk the streets around there routinely, and most of them are young, I would say in their 20s. There are probably ones that are a little older, but this particular shelter is a single man one, and other shelters maybe you have different profiles, and they are it's been really hard for the homeowners. Is Creedmoor situated in a residential area? There's single family homes. There's a public elementary school right across the street. They have closed that schoolyard that used to be very popular with kids hanging around after school to play with each other. They've since closed that, because in front of that schoolyard are benches, like many schoolyards, where these men are sitting around. I mean, are they doing anything threatening? I mean, not that I've seen, but they're not of the school. They're not of the demographic. They didn't used to live there. It's not a situation that families have bought into and that they want for their families. So you've got a quality of life issue.
Yeah. The quality of life thing is huge. No, the quality of life thing is huge, because you'll see people will say like, well, they're not doing anything, and it's like, and I'm saying like, well, get them the fuck out of here, man. Like they're hopefully no one takes that.
They're riding on the bus that you have to take to work or commute to school. They are going on private properties to try to collect recycling bottles for cans. And I've heard that they're committing petty crime as well. I mean, so there's a sense of unease. Sense of unease in the neighborhood. And then even if you don't live around there, there's two other issues. One is both the city and state are providing billions of dollars of funding to migrants. Our mayor, our embattled mayor has been pretty vocal, especially in the last year or so, about just how much money is going to migrant services, right? $5 billion on its $10 billion. And at the state, over $4.3 billion have been signed off by the incumbent I'm challenging. We're just giving money. And to me is, to what end? Like, to what end is this going to go? It just keeps going out. And these are people who never paid a cent in taxes. And I speak to working class, middle class in my district who work from early in the morning to late at night. Some people take 2 jobs because inflation's on the rise, the cost of living is on the rise, to pay taxes. They hate hearing that these men are getting free shelter, free food. Families are getting $1,200 in debit cards, Metro cards, cell phones, healthcare. These are all things that we have to pay after we pay taxes, right? Coming out of our budgets. That infuriates people. And then I'm also talking to a large population of voters that are immigrants, that know what it takes to actually immigrate here through our more standard protocol, or still have families that are trying to come over the standard way of through either family sponsorship or through work sponsorship, that are very angry that they're waiting years and sometimes over a decade. And yet they see men blocks from where they live, living off of our taxpayer money that we never got to do when we came here as immigrants. So yeah, those I would say are the top issues. And then there's definitely more local issues like rezoning, congestion pricing, overcrowded classrooms that are, that bother families with children in my district. So lots of things, but I would say crime and migrants are the top 2 by far.
Yeah, for sure. And it's that, the quality of life thing. I mean, like the idea, I see this often when people talk about, in particular like crime, like on the subway, the idea that, if nobody died today, or if nobody was murdered and nobody was physically, assaulted, then you got nothing to complain about. And it's like, no, you got a ton of things to complain about when, you sit down on a train car and then some maniac comes in and you're like, okay, I guess I got to go to another train car.
Yeah.
Or, somebody's leering at you and all that. And it's, I don't understand it. I will never understand that pro-criminal, I don't know, ideology.
Accepting of these things. Yeah, why? Like, why? Yeah, no, I'm with you, Lou. And I would say that for voters that I've visited in Little Neck, where it is very nice, that actually, because they're not close to Creedmoor, thank goodness for them.
Right. Yeah.
And generally speaking, aside from, I want to say car thefts, which is numerous, especially in a nice area like Little Neck and Douglaston, most people are to themselves, but their number one complaint is, I feel our quality of life is being impacted. And they say, Yiatin, focus on quality of life. We moved to this eastern corner of New York City for a little green space, for our own home or a co-op that we have in these areas, good schools. And that's what we want our electeds to be able to, number one, restore and maintain for us. So that's a big focus for me.
Well, I wish I was living there so you can get my vote. But like I said, I'm going to work on my parents, and I'm going to push for Chu 2024. Is it happening this November? Is that?
Yes. It's just weeks away.
Oh man!
I am on the ballot November 5th. The early voting will start October 26th. But many people have already gotten their absentee ballots. People vote by absentee, by mail. They already have that in their mailboxes this week. So I am on the ballot. I am running on the Republican and on the conservative lines. Look for my name. I'm running against the incumbent who has been in the seat for 25 years. We need a change.
Wow.
Yeah, she is. She's 85 years old. She has been in the seat for 25 years. She took it over after her late husband passed in 1999. He started in the state legislature in 1966. So the Stavisky dynasty has been in Queens for almost 60 years. And I say we need them to move on, and
Yep.
I would love to represent this beautiful district of mine.
Awesome. Yiatin Chu, thank you so much.